They say money can't buy happiness, but it can definitely buy revenge. When tech mogul Alexander Keelan boarded his private jet to Paris Fashion Week, he thought he was pulling off the perfect crime, a romantic getaway with his Instagram model Mistress right under his wife's nose. He thought his wife Eleanor was just a quiet, clueless homemaker back in Connecticut. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Alexander didn't know that the fashion show he was desperate to attend wasn't just sponsored by his wife. It was a trap designed specifically for him. This is the story of how a billionaire lost his fortune, his dignity, and his mistress in a single night, all while sitting in the front row. The Keelan estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was the kind of house that didn't just whisper wealth. It screamed old money, even if Alexander Keelan's money was decidedly new. Alexander, 45, handsome in a jagged, aggressive way, had made his billions in high-frequency trading algorithms. He viewed the world as a series of transactions. You put an input in, you get a yield out. His wife, Eleanor, was an input. He had ceased to calculate years ago. At 42, Eleanor Keelan was beautiful in the way a statue in a museum is beautiful, cool, distant, and seemingly immutable. She spent her days tending to their prize-winning orchids, organizing charity galas for the local library, and ensuring Alexander's life ran with the silent precision of a Swiss watch. To Alexander, she was a fixture, a reliable, boring asset. He had no idea that for the past 5 years, Eleanor had been the majority shadow shareholder of L'Ombre Capital, a private equity firm in Zurich that specialized in distressed luxury assets. "Alex, darling," Eleanor said over breakfast on a Tuesday morning. The light from the bay windows caught the rim of her porcelain teacup. "You seem restless." Alexander didn't look up from his tablet. He was texting Chloe. "Just business, Elle. The volatile markets in Asia. I might need to take a trip later this week. A quick run to Europe to calm some investors." "Europe?" Eleanor buttered her toast methodically. "In September. That's usually when... Well, never mind. It's Fashion Week in Paris, isn't it? I suppose the hotels will be dreadful." Alexander's heart skipped a beat, but his face remained a mask of indifference. "Is it I hadn't noticed? I'll be in meetings in Frankfurt mostly. Maybe a stop in Paris for a client dinner." "Of course," Eleanor smiled. It was a small, tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Well, you must go. Business comes first." The truth was, Alexander had no meetings in Frankfurt. He had Chloe Vane. Chloe was 23, a lifestyle influencer with 1.2 million followers and an appetite for validation that no amount of likes could satiate. She had been pressuring Alexander for 6 months to take their relationship public-ish. She didn't want him to leave his wife. Chloe wasn't ready to be a stepmother, but she wanted the perks. She wanted the jet. She wanted the access. "If you don't take me to the Maison Dubois show, Alex, I'm going to start tagging my location when I post photos from your penthouse." Chloe had threatened the night before, her voice a mix of baby doll whine and razor blade threat. "Jean-Luc Dubois is making his comeback. Everyone who matters will be there. If I'm not there, I'm nobody." Alexander had caved. He bought the tickets through a concierge service for $15,000 a seat. He booked the suite impériale at the Ritz Paris. He arranged for the business trip cover story. Later that afternoon, as Alexander packed his Louis Vuitton duffel, Eleanor leaned against the doorframe of his walk-in closet. "Take the blue velvet tuxedo," she suggested softly. "The blue." Alexander frowned. "Too flashy for bankers." "Humor me," she said, walking over and brushing lint off his shoulder. "If you do end up at a dinner in Paris, You want to look like you own the place. Besides, I bought it for you. It brings out your eyes." She packed it for him. She also packed a very specific pair of cufflinks, obsidian skulls with diamond eyes. "Have fun, Alex," she whispered, kissing him on the cheek. She smelled of white tea and something sharper, like ozone, before a storm. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. As the black SUV took him away, Eleanor walked to her study. She picked up her secure line phone. "He's en route," she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing all the airy lightness of the Greenwich housewife. "Is everything in place, Madame Keelan?" a French voice answered on the other end. It was Henri, her personal fixers in Paris. "Yes," Eleanor said, looking at a dossier on her desk. It was a portfolio of the Maison Dubois show. Her signature was on the bottom of the funding documents. "Ensure the seating chart is adjusted. Row 1, seat A and B for them." And Henri, "Yes, madame. Make sure the cameras know exactly where to look." The flight over was a nightmare of champagne and complaints. Chloe Vane did not travel quietly. "The Wi-Fi on this jet is garbage, Alex," she snapped, posing for a selfie with a glass of Dom Perignon, careful to crop out Alexander's face, but leaving his distinctive Patek Philippe watch visible on the armrest. "How am I supposed to tease the trip?" "Just wait until we land," Alexander muttered, nursing a scotch. He was already feeling the strain. The thrill of the affair was usually contained to hotel rooms and late-night texts. Being trapped in a metal tube with Chloe for 7 hours was revealing cracks in her persona. She wasn't just high maintenance, she was vacuous. Eleanor never complains about the Wi-Fi, a traitorous thought whispered in his mind. He squashed it. Eleanor was boring. Chloe was fire. They landed at Le Bourget just as the sun was setting over Paris. The city was glowing, a sprawl of gold and grey. Alexander felt the familiar rush of power. He was rich, he was in Paris, and he had a beautiful woman on his arm. But the atmosphere shifted the moment they arrived at the Ritz. Usually the staff at the Ritz fawned over Alexander. He was a whale client. But today the reception was odd. The concierge, a man named Pierre, who had known Alexander for years, didn't offer the usual warm handshake. He offered a polite, stiff nod. "Monsieur Keelan." "Mademoiselle," Pierre said, eyes flicking briefly to Chloe's midriff-bearing travel outfit, which was perhaps a bit too LA for the Place Vendôme. "We have checked you into the suite. However, I must inform you that the spa is fully booked for the duration of your stay, as is the main restaurant, L'Espadon." "Booked?" Alexander scowled. "I'm Alexander Keelan. I don't need a reservation. I'm afraid the entire hotel has been block-booked for a private event by a majority stakeholder," Pierre said smoothly. "We have made an exception for your room as a courtesy to your long history with us, but the amenities are restricted." Chloe huffed, spinning her Rimowa suitcase. "Whatever, Alex. Let's just go shopping. I need a dress for the pre-party tonight." They went to Avenue Montaigne. Chloe dragged him into Chanel Dior, and finally a boutique called Vance & Co., a rising avant-garde label that was the it brand of the season. "Oh my God!" Chloe squealed. "This is it! The Dubois show is sponsored by Vance & Co. If I wear this, maybe I can get backstage." She picked out a sheer architectural gown that looked like it was made of spun silver and spider webs. It cost 12,000 euros. Alexander handed over his black Amex Centurion card. The clerk inserted the card. He frowned. He tried again. "Monsieur," the clerk said, his voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "The card has been declined." Alexander laughed, a bark of genuine amusement. "Impossible. Run it again. It has no limit. It says, refer to issuer. Potential fraud detected. Alexander's face went red. He pulled out his backup visa. Declined. He pulled out his corporate card. Approved. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Bank glitch, he muttered to a suspicious-looking Chloe. My security team probably flagged the location change. I'll call them later. He didn't know that back in Greenwich, Eleanor was sitting at her computer, logged into the family trust admin portal. She wasn't freezing his assets, that would be too obvious. She was tripping the fraud algorithms, just enough to annoy him, just enough to make him sweat. That night they attended the pre-show cocktail party at a gallery in Le Marais. It was the place to be. Models with limbs like gazelles smoked cigarettes on the balcony. Editors from Vogue and Harper's Bazaar huddled in corners judging outfits. Chloe, wearing the Vance & Co. dress, strutted in like she owned the place. Alexander trailed behind, feeling strangely out of place in his blue velvet tuxedo. Alex, look! Chloe grabbed his arm, her nails digging in. That's Anna, and that's the editor of French Vogue. We have to go say hi. They approached a circle of fashion elites. Alexander prepared his charming billionaire smile. Excuse me, Chloe chirped. I just love your column. The editor turned. She looked Chloe up and down, her eyes lingering on the Vance & Co. dress. Then she looked at Alexander. A flash of recognition crossed her face, and then something else. Pity amusement. Lovely dress, the editor said, her French accent dripping with ice. It's from the Siren collection, isn't it? Ironically, the theme of that collection was the foolish lover. The circle tittered. Chloe didn't get it. She beamed. Yes, it's so chic. And you must be Mr. Keelan, the editor said, extending a hand to Alexander. We were just speaking about your wife. Alexander froze. My wife? Yes, Eleanor, a remarkable woman. Her eye for detail is legendary. You know Eleanor, Alexander stammered. Eleanor who bought her clothes from catalogues. Eleanor who thought couture was a type of soup. In a manner of speaking, the editor smiled enigmatically. Enjoy the show tomorrow, Mr. Keelan. I hear the finale is going to be explosive. As they walked away, Alexander felt a cold prickle on the back of his neck. Why was she talking about your boring wife? Chloe complained, grabbing a waiter for a glass of champagne. Does she buy charity tables or something? I don't know, Alexander murmured, scanning the room. That's when he saw her. Across the gallery, in the VIP section, roped off by velvet cords, a woman stood with her back to him. She was wearing a tuxedo dress, sharp masculine, yet incredibly sexy. Her hair was swept up in a chignon that defied gravity. She turned her head slightly to laugh at something a man next to her said. The man was Jean-Luc Dubois, the designer of the moment. The profile, the curve of the neck. It looked exactly like Eleanor. Alexander blinked, and a waiter walked past with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, blocking his view. When the waiter moved, the woman was gone. You're seeing ghosts, Alexander told himself. Eleanor is in Connecticut, deadheading roses. But his phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. Hope the meetings in Frankfurt are going well. The weather there looks stormy. Pack an umbrella. Love, E. Alexander looked out the window. It was raining in Paris. He checked the weather app for Frankfurt. Clear skies. Just a coincidence, he muttered, loosening his tie. But the noose was already tightening. The morning of the Maison Dubois show broke over Paris with a grey, weeping sky. But inside the Suite Impériale, the atmosphere was electric with anxiety. Alexander woke up with a headache that throbbed behind his eyes like a strobe light. Beside him, Chloe was already awake, surrounded by a team of stylists she had hired on his credit card to prep her for her big moment. No more highlighter, Chloe was barking at a terrified French makeup artist. I need to look like I'm glowing from within, like I'm undeniably happy. Alexander sat up, rubbing his temples. He checked his phone. 4 missed calls from his CFO in New York. That was odd. It was 3 a.m. in New York. He dialed the number. Gavin? What's going on? Alex, finally. Gavin's voice was tight, bordering on panic. We have a situation with the liquidity pool, the shadowy holdco that bought into our Series B round 3 years ago. They just exercised a call option. They're demanding an immediate audit of the Asian accounts. Which holdco? Alexander demanded, walking out to the balcony, closing the glass door to block out the sound of Chloe's hairdryer. L'Ombre Capital, Gavin said. The Swiss firm. Alex, if they audit us now before the Hong Kong merger closes, the stock price will tank. Who are these guys? I can't find a beneficial owner listed anywhere. It's buried under shell companies. Alexander felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the morning chill. Stall them, Gavin. Tell them I'm in. Tell them I'm unreachable. I'll deal with it on Monday. He hung up his hands, shaking slightly. L'Ombre Capital. The shadow. It sounded ominous, melodramatic even. Babe. Chloe slid the glass door open, looking fierce in full glam. Stop working, the car is downstairs. It's show time. She looked undeniably stunning in the Vance & Co. silver dress, though Alexander couldn't help but notice it looked predatory, like the skin of a snake. He put on his blue velvet tuxedo, the one Eleanor had packed for him. You look rich, Chloe purred, adjusting his bow tie. Let's go make them jealous. The venue for the Maison Dubois show was the Palais de Tokyo, a hulking structure of concrete and marble. Usually the entrance to a fashion show is a chaotic crush of street-style photographers, desperate bloggers and security guards. But when Alexander's black Mercedes Maybach pulled up, the crowd seemed to part like the Red Sea. Look! Chloe gasped, grabbing his knee. The paparazzi. There are hundreds of them. She was right. A wall of lenses turned toward their car. Flashes erupted in a blinding staccato rhythm. Chloe adjusted her dress, put on her practiced pout, and stepped out. Over here, Chloe, Chloe! Someone shouted. She preened, turning to Alexander and whispering, See, I told you my engagement is up. But as Alexander stepped out, he noticed something strange. The photographers weren't just snapping photos. They were shouting questions. And they weren't shouting at Chloe. Monsieur Keelan, is it true? Alexander, how is your wife? Are you worried about the audit, monsieur? Alexander stiffened, grabbing Chloe's elbow and propelling her toward the entrance. Ignore them. Just walk. They know my name, Chloe squealed, oblivious to the context. Inside the venue was transformed. Jean-Luc Dubois was known for his atmospheric sets. This season the runway was a long, jagged crack running through the center of a black floor. The lighting was dim red and pulsating. The theme projected on the back wall in giant neon letters was simply La Vérité, the truth. A beautifully dressed usher with a headset stopped them. Monsieur Keelan, Mademoiselle Vane, you are in the prime sector. Prime sector, Chloe whispered. Is that better than front row? It is the only row for you today, the usher said with a cryptic smile, leading them down the long, jagged runway. Usually the best seats are in the middle, but the usher walked them all the way to the very end of the runway, right where the models would stop to pose for the photographers. These were the head-of-table seats, the most visible spots in the entire room. "Oh my God," Chloe breathed, sitting down. "Alex, we are literally the kings of Paris right now. Look, Anna Wintour is 3 rows behind us." Alexander looked back. Indeed, the high priestess of fashion was seated further back along with the editors and the celebrities. But they weren't looking at the runway. They were looking at him. He saw whispers behind manicured hands. He saw smartphones, raised lenses pointed discreetly at his blue tuxedo. "Something is wrong," Alexander hissed. "We're too exposed." "Relax," Chloe snapped, checking her makeup in her phone camera. "You're just not used to being the main character. Enjoy it." The lights dimmed. The room plunged into darkness. A heavy industrial bass beat began to thump, vibrating in Alexander's chest. Thump, thump, thump. Like a heartbeat, or footsteps. A voiceover echoed through the speakers. It was a woman's voice, distorted, synthesized, but hauntingly familiar. "We build castles out of lies," the voice purred in French, then English. "We wear masks of velvet to hide hearts of stone. But eventually, the lights come on." Alexander gripped the armrests of his chair. He knew that cadence. He knew that pause. It was Eleanor. "That sounds like—" he started, but the music swelled, drowning him out. The first model stomped onto the runway. The show was not subtle. Jean-Luc Dubois was not known for subtlety, but this was visceral. The first model wore a suit that looked exactly like a deconstructed version of a banker's attire. The fabric was shredded, revealing lining that looked like blood-red silk. In her hand, she carried a briefcase that was transparent, filled with what looked like shredded money. Chloe clapped politely. "So avant-garde." The second model came out. A man. He was wearing a blue velvet tuxedo. Alexander froze. The tuxedo on the runway was identical to the one he was wearing. Down to the lapels, down to the shade of midnight blue. But there was a difference. On the back of the model's jacket, embroidered in gold thread, was the word liar. A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. Heads turned toward Alexander. He felt the blood drain from his face. "Alex," Chloe whispered, her smile faltering. "That guy is dressed like you. Is this... Did you plan this?" I don't know," Alexander stammered. The third model appeared. A woman. She was wearing a silver spiderweb dress, a replica of the Vance & Co. dress Chloe was wearing right now. But this model was wearing a literal leash around her neck, holding it out to an invisible master. On the front of her dress in neon paint, Mistress. The murmurs became audible gasps. Cameras flashed blindingly, not at the model, but at Chloe and Alexander. Chloe looked down at her dress, then at the model, then at the photographers. Her face went from confusion to horror. "Alex, what is happening? Why are they wearing our clothes?" "We have to leave," Alexander said, standing up. "Now!" He turned to the aisle, but a large security guard with crossed arms blocked the path. "Please remain seated until the finale." "Monsieur," the guard said, "it is part of the performance. I am Alexander Keelan. Move." "Sit down, Alex," a voice hissed from the row behind him. It was the editor of French Vogue. "Don't make it worse. You're the show." Defeated, terrified, Alexander sank back into his chair. He was trapped. A spotlight hit him, pinning him to the seat like an insect in a display case. The music shifted. The aggressive industrial beat faded into a haunting orchestral piece. The backdrop screen changed. It wasn't abstract art anymore. It was footage. grainy black and white surveillance footage. Alexander watched in horror as the screen showed the lobby of the Ritz, then the interior of an elevator. He saw himself kissing Chloe. He saw them entering the suite. It wasn't explicit, but it was intimate. It was undeniable proof. Then documents flashed on the screen, not fashion sketches. Bank transfers from Alexander Keelan Personal Holdings to Chloe Vane. Memo, rent and allowance. The numbers were huge on the screen. $15,000. $20,000. The audience wasn't looking at the clothes anymore. They were filming the screen, laughing, pointing. It was a public execution by multimedia. Chloe was sobbing now, trying to cover her face with her clutch. "Make it stop, Alex, make it stop, my followers. Everyone is seeing this." "I can't," Alexander whispered. He felt numb. His career, his reputation, his privacy incinerated in minutes. Then the music stopped abruptly. Complete silence fell over the massive hall. The spotlight on Alexander turned off. A single bright white spotlight hit the top of the runway. Jean-Luc Dubois, the designer, walked out. He bowed to the applause, then held up a hand for silence. "Thank you," he said, his voice booming. "Fashion is about expression, but tonight fashion is about justice. This collection was funded and inspired by a single muse, a woman who taught me that elegance is the best armor. Please welcome the majority owner of Maison Dubois and the new CEO of L'Ombre Capital." Alexander stopped breathing. "Mrs. Eleanor Keelan." The backdrop screen split open. Eleanor walked out. She wasn't wearing the sensible cardigan she wore in Connecticut. She was wearing a tuxedo gown of pure white silk, sharp as a knife, with the obsidian skull cufflinks Alexander thought were in his suitcase. Her hair was slicked back, her makeup severe and stunning. She looked like a queen. She looked like an executioner. She didn't walk like a housewife. She walked with the predatory grace of a panther. She stopped at the end of the runway, 3 feet from where Alexander sat, slumped in his blue velvet shame. The audience erupted, a standing ovation. They loved the drama. They loved the power move. Eleanor looked down at Alexander. Her expression wasn't angry. It wasn't sad. It was bored. She signaled for a microphone. "Hello, Alexander," she said. Her voice was amplified, crisp and clear, echoing through the Palais de Tokyo. "Eleanor," he croaked. "You told me you were in Frankfurt," she said, tilting her head. "But I see you found your way to my show, and you brought a guest." She looked at Chloe, who was shrinking into her chair, mascara running down her cheeks. "Miss Vane," Eleanor said politely, "I believe you're wearing a prototype from my subsidiary brand. You can keep it. Consider it a severance package." She turned back to Alexander. "You see, darling," Eleanor continued, pacing slightly, addressing the room as much as him. "You always underestimated the boring parts of your life. You thought I was just gardening. But while you were trading algorithms, I was trading assets. While you were buying dinners for her, I was buying the debt of your company." Alexander's eyes widened. The call from Gavin. "L'Ombre Capital." You're L'Ombre." "I am." Eleanor smiled. "And as of this morning, I have called in your loans. Your assets are frozen, Alexander. Your cards are declined because I declined them. The jet you flew in on, it's been repossessed. It won't be taking you home." She leaned in closer, the microphone catching a harsh breath. "You wanted a life of excitement, Alex. You wanted drama. So I gave you a front row seat. I hope it was worth it." She dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. Eleanor turned and walked back up the runway, the white silk of her dress billowing behind her. The lights cut to black. For a second, there was silence. Then the internet broke. The lights at the Palais de Tokyo did not stay off for long. When the house lights flooded the venue, they revealed a scene of absolute chaos. Usually the end of a fashion show is a polite shuffling of feet and air kisses. This was a riot. The elite of the fashion world, editors, buyers, celebrities, were standing on their chairs, craning their necks to get a better look at row 1, seat A. Alexander Keelan sat frozen. The blue velvet tuxedo, once a symbol of his arrogance, now felt like a clown suit. He looked to his left. Chloe Vane was gone. She hadn't waited for him. She had scrambled over the barrier and was pushing her way through the crowd, desperate to escape the blast radius of his humiliation. "Chloe!" Alexander shouted, his voice cracking. He stood up, his legs feeling like jelly. "Mr. Keelan! Mr. Keelan!" A wall of reporters surged forward, ignoring the security guards who were making a half-hearted attempt to hold them back. "Did you know your wife was the investor? Is it true you're bankrupt? Who is the mistress? What is her handle?" Alexander shoved a microphone out of his face. He needed to get out. He needed air. He pushed through the crowd, his shoulder checking a famous pop star in the process. He didn't care. He stumbled out into the cool Paris night. The rain had started again. He spotted Chloe near the curb. She was screaming at a terrified Uber driver who was refusing to let her in because she was soaking wet and hysterical. "Chloe!" Alexander ran to her, grabbing her arm. "We need to stick together. We need to figure this out." Chloe spun around. Her mascara was running in black rivulets down her face, ruining the glow she had screamed at her makeup artist for earlier. The silver Vance and Company dress was sagging in the rain. "Stick together," she shrieked. "Are you insane? You're radioactive. Alex? Did you hear what she said? You're broke." "I'm not broke," Alexander lied, though the knot in his stomach said otherwise. "It's just a liquidity freeze. I'll fix it in the morning. I just need to call my lawyers." "Your card got declined at the boutique," Chloe yelled, not caring who heard. A few paparazzi were already circling their flashes, popping like gunfire in the drizzle. "You made me fly here to be humiliated. Do you know what my comment section looks like right now? Everyone is calling me the leashed girl. My brand is ruined." "I can buy you a new brand," Alexander roared. "With what money?" Chloe spat. She pulled out her phone. "I'm doing damage control." She hit record on Instagram Live. The transformation was instant. Her face softened into a mask of tearful victimhood. "Guys!" She sobbed into the camera, angling it, so Alexander was visible in the pathetic background. I didn't know. He told me they were separated. He told me she was crazy. I was lied to just like everyone else. I'm a victim of a narcissist." "Put that away." Alexander lunged for the phone. Chloe stepped back, her eyes hard. "Don't touch me. Stay away from me, Alexander, or I'll call the police and tell them you assaulted me." She turned back to the Uber driver, threw a wad of cash, Alexander's cash from earlier in the trip, at him, and dove into the car. The door slammed shut, splashing puddle water onto Alexander's velvet trousers. Alexander stood alone on the sidewalk. The rain soaked through the velvet, making it heavy and cold. He reached for his phone to call his driver. Then he remembered the car had been repossessed. The Maybach was gone. He opened his Uber app. Payment method invalid. He opened his Lyft app. Card declined. He checked his pockets. He had 0 cash. He had given the last of his euros to the coat check girl at the gallery the night before to show off. He was a billionaire stranded in Paris with nothing but a tuxedo and a dead phone battery. He began to walk. It took him an hour to walk back to the Ritz. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. He marched up to the revolving doors, ready to demand entry, to demand a bottle of whiskey, to scream at Pierre until the world made sense again. 2 large men in black suits were standing outside the entrance. They weren't the usual Ritz doormen. They looked like private military contractors. "Mr. Keelan," one of them said, stepping in front of the door. "We have been expecting you." "Get out of my way," Alexander snarled. "I'm going to my suite." "Your reservation has been cancelled," the guard said impassively. "And your belongings have been packed." He pointed to the curb. There, sitting in the rain, was his Louis Vuitton duffel bag. It looked deflated. "This is illegal," Alexander shouted. "I have tenant rights. I've stayed here for 10 years. "The hotel is currently under a private buyout for a corporate event," the guard recited. "The new management reserves the right to refuse service. You are trespassing." "Who is the management?" Alexander demanded, though he already knew the answer. The guard smiled, a small, pitying thing. "The event is hosted by L'Ombre Capital." Eleanor. She hadn't just bought the fashion show. She had rented out the Ritz. "Where is my wife?" Alexander hissed. "Tell her I want to talk to her." "Mrs. Keelan is currently dining in the L'Espadon suite with the board of directors," the guard said. "She left a message for you, however." The guard reached into his pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Alexander snatched it. His hands were shaking so hard he tore the paper. Inside was a single card. No handwritten note. No emotional plea. It was a boarding pass. Airline Budget Air. Class Economy. Route CDG to JFK. Departure 6 a.m. And clipped to the boarding pass was a metro ticket for the train to the airport. Alexander looked up at the windows of the Ritz. On the second floor, the lights of the restaurant were glowing warm and gold. He could see silhouettes of people laughing, drinking wine, celebrating. For a second, he thought he saw a woman in a white dress standing at the window looking down. He looked down at his soaked velvet shoes. He picked up his duffel bag. It was heavy. He turned and walked toward the metro station. The flight back was a hallucination of misery. Alexander Keelan, a man who hadn't flown commercial since 2008, was squeezed into seat 34B between a backpacker who smelled of patchouli and a mother holding a screaming infant. He wore his tuxedo because he had no other clothes that were dry. The blue velvet was stained and wrinkled. People stared. Someone took a photo and airdropped it to the entire cabin. He heard giggles ripple through the plane. He landed in New York at noon. He didn't have money for a cab to Connecticut. He had to use the emergency credit card his assistant kept for apocalyptic scenarios, a limit of $2,000. It worked barely. He didn't go home to Greenwich. He went straight to his office in Midtown Manhattan, or he tried to. When he swiped his badge at the turnstile of the Keelan Tower, the light flashed red. Access denied. "Hey, Frank," Alexander yelled at the security guard he had employed for 12 years. "Buzz me in. The badge is glitching." Frank looked up from his desk. He looked sad. "I can't do that, Mr. Keelan. I've got orders. Orders from whom I own the building." "Receivership, sir," Frank said. "The building is under lockdown pending the audit results. You're not allowed on the premises without legal counsel." Alexander slumped against the glass turnstile. Receivership. It was happening faster than he thought possible. He pulled out his phone. He had charged it in the airport bathroom. He dialed his lawyer, Marcus Thorne, The most expensive shark in New York. "Marcus," Alexander barked. "Fix this, now. Get an injunction. Sue Eleanor. Sue the Ritz. Sue everyone." "Alex," Marcus's voice was uncharacteristically gentle. "You need to come to my office. We have a problem." 30 minutes later, Alexander was sitting in a leather chair in Marcus's office. He was still wearing the tuxedo. He drank a glass of scotch in one gulp. "What problem?" Alexander demanded. "We have a prenup, a bulletproof prenup. I made sure of it. She gets the house in Greenwich and $5 million. She can't touch the company. She can't touch the trading algorithms." Marcus sighed and placed a thick file on the desk. "The prenup covers divorce, Alex. It protects your assets from being claimed as marital property. It does not protect you from corporate hostility." "What are you talking about? Eleanor isn't trying to take your money as your wife," Marcus explained, leaning forward. "She's taking it as your creditor. She didn't sue for alimony. She bought your debt." Marcus opened the file. 3 years ago, when you leveraged the company to expand into the Asian markets, you took a massive loan from a consortium called Apex Holdings. Remember?" "Yes, of course. Standard mezzanine financing." "Apex Holdings sold that debt 6 months later to a shell company in Zurich," Marcus said. "That shell company is L'Ombre. Eleanor owns it." Alexander felt the room spin. So, Marcus continued, "that loan had covenants, very specific performance clauses. If your liquidity dropped below a certain ratio or, and this is the kicker, if the CEO became involved in reputational scandal that materially affects stock value, the lender has the right to call the full principal immediately." Marcus slid an iPad across the desk. It showed the stock chart of Keelan Corp. It was a vertical red line dropping into the abyss. "The Paris stunt tanked the stock," Marcus said. "You violated the reputation clause. Eleanor called the loan this morning. You owe L'Ombre Capital $400 million, due immediately." "I don't have $400 million liquid," Alexander shouted. "It's all tied up in positions." "Exactly," Marcus said, "which means you are in default. And per the loan agreement, in the event of default, the lender assumes control of the collateral." "The collateral," Alexander whispered. "The collateral was the voting shares of the company," Marcus said grimly. "Alex, as of 9 a.m. this morning, Eleanor isn't just your wife. She is the majority shareholder and CEO of Keelan Corp. She fired you." Alexander sat in silence. The scotch turned to acid in his stomach. She had played him. She hadn't just caught him cheating. She had financed the environment in which he would cheat, knowing exactly how he would react, knowing he would ignore the business details to chase a skirt. "There's more," Marcus said, hesitating. What more could there be? She sent a settlement offer, a personal one." Marcus handed him a single sheet of paper. It was on Eleanor's personal stationery, heavy cream-colored cardstock with her monogram. Alexander read it. "Proposal for Resolution 1. Alexander Keelan will resign from all corporate boards, effectively immediately. 2. He will vacate the Greenwich estate within 48 hours. 3. He will grant an uncontested divorce. 4. In exchange, L'Ombre Capital will forgive the personal guarantee on the debt, allowing him to avoid bankruptcy court. Note: he may keep the blue velvet tuxedo." Alexander stared at the paper. The line about the tuxedo was the final knife twist. It was a joke to her, a game. "If I fight this?" Alexander asked, looking up. "You'll lose," Marcus said bluntly. "She has the paperwork. She has the moral high ground. And frankly, Alex, she has the money. You don't. I can't even bill you for this hour because your accounts are frozen." Alexander closed his eyes. He thought of Eleanor. Not the queen of shadows he saw in Paris, but the woman he had ignored for 10 years. The woman who made sure his socks were folded. The woman who listened to him drone on about high-frequency trading over dinner, nodding politely while he assumed she didn't understand. She had understood everything. She had understood it better than he did. "Where is she?" Alexander asked. "She's back," Marcus said. "She's at the Greenwich house. She's expecting you to pack." Alexander stood up. He smoothed the wrinkles of his ruined tuxedo. "I'm going to see her." "Alex, don't do anything stupid," Marcus warned. "I'm not going to fight," Alexander said, his voice hollow. "I just want to know why. Why wait 5 years? Why not just leave me?" He walked out of the office. He had to face the architect of his destruction. The Uber ride from the chaos of Manhattan to the quiet wealth of Greenwich was a slow, humiliating procession through the geography of Alexander's past life. He had no cash, so he had bartered his watch, a Patek Philippe Grand Complications, worth more than the driver's entire college tuition just to get home. The driver, a confused 20-year-old named Luis, who drove a Honda Civic that smelled of vape smoke and pine air freshener, had looked at the watch, then at Alexander's stained blue velvet tuxedo, and asked if it was stolen. "It's mine," Alexander had rasped, clutching his empty duffel bag. "It's the only thing that is still mine." The drive took an hour. Alexander spent it staring out the window as the grime of the city gave way to the manicured perfection of Connecticut. Every mile was a reminder of what he was losing. The stone walls, the ancient oaks, the long, winding driveways that hinted at unseen power. This was the kingdom he had claimed. This was the realm he thought he ruled. When the Civic finally crunched onto the gravel of the Keelan estate, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, bruised shadows across the lawn. The house, a Georgian revival masterpiece of brick and limestone, looked indifferent to his ruin. It stood as it always had, solid, imposing, and utterly silent. But the locks had been changed. Alexander stood on the front porch, his hand hovering over the keypad. The code had always been his birthday. He tried it. The light flashed angry red. He tried Eleanor's birthday. Red again. He tried the date of their wedding. Red. He rang the doorbell. It felt absurd, ringing the bell of his own home, like a salesman peddling vacuum cleaners. The door didn't open immediately. He waited 2 minutes, then 3. He could hear the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer. Finally, the heavy oak door swung inward. It wasn't the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable. It was Eleanor. She wasn't wearing the sharp, weaponized couture of Paris. She wasn't the queen of shadows in white silk. She was dressed in soft, oversized cashmere, a sweater the color of oatmeal, and loose linen trousers. She was barefoot. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, messy bun, the kind she used to wear on Sunday mornings when they would read the paper together. She looked comfortable. She looked serene. She looked like the wife he had ignored for a decade. Except for her eyes. Her eyes were clear, dry, and terrifyingly devoid of warmth. "You're late," she said, her voice conversational, as if he were returning from a golf game that had run over. She checked her watch, a simple vintage Cartier tank that he hadn't bought her. "The movers are scheduled for 5:00 p.m. You have 45 minutes. "Eleanor." Alexander breathed the name catching in his throat. He stepped into the foyer, half expecting her to block his path. She didn't. She simply stepped aside like a museum guard watching a visitor. "We need to talk. Please." "We're past talking, Alex," she said, turning her back to him and walking down the hallway. "We are at the liquidation phase." He followed her, his velvet loafers making no sound on the hardwood he had paid to have imported from Italy. "Liquidation? Is that what I am to you now? An asset to be written off? A bad trade?" She led him into the library. The room, usually the dark, masculine heart of the house, felt strange. It was stripped. His shelves of first editions were empty. His humidor was gone. His framed magazine covers, Fortune, Forbes, Barron's, had been taken down, leaving pale rectangular outlines on the dark walnut paneling like ghosts. Only 2 wingback chairs remained facing the cold fireplace. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the chair on the left. Alexander sat. He felt small. The chair swallowed him. He looked at Eleanor, searching for the hysteria, the screaming, the tear-streaked face of a woman, scorned. He wanted her to yell. He wanted her to throw a vase. Anger he could understand. Anger was passionate. Anger meant she still cared. But this absolute clinical calm, it terrified him. "Why?" he asked, the word cracking in the silence. "I know I screwed up, Elle. I know Chloe was a mistake. A massive, stupid mistake. But to destroy the company, to burn down everything we built over 20 years. Why go this far? You've destroyed your own livelihood just to hurt me." Eleanor moved to a side table and poured herself a cup of tea from a silver service. She didn't offer him any. The sound of the china clinking was the only noise in the room. "We didn't build it, Alexander," she said, softly, taking a sip. "I built it." Alexander blinked, confusion warring with his exhaustion. "What are you talking about? I built Keelan Corp from the ground up. I wrote the initial algorithms. I made the trades. I was the one on the floor screaming orders while you were home." Eleanor laughed. It was a dry sound like dead leaves skittering on pavement. "You wrote the front-end interface, Alex. You designed the dashboard because you liked the pretty colors. You were the face. You were the salesman. You were very good at shaking hands and drinking scotch and making people believe you were a genius." She set the teacup down. Her gaze locked onto his, stripping him bare. But the core trading logic, the black box volatility protocols that saved us in the 2008 crash, the latency arbitrage code that made us our first billion in 2012, who do you think wrote those? I had a team. Alexander stammered, his memory grasping for a foothold. David's Chen, the guys in the back office. Davids and Chen were interns. Eleanor cut in, her voice sharpening. They couldn't code a hello world in Python without crashing the server. I wrote the code, Alex, me. Alexander sat stunned. A memory flashed late nights coming home at 2 a.m., finding Eleanor in his study, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in her glasses. "You said you were organizing files," he whispered. "You said you were cleaning up my desktop." "I was rewriting your future," she corrected. "Your original code was a mess, Alex. It leaked memory. It was slow. If I hadn't fixed the kernel in 2009, the flash crash would have wiped us out. I optimized your latency. I patched your security holes. I was the ghost in the machine." "But why?" Alexander asked, his voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Why let me take the credit all these years? Because I loved you," she said simply. The past tense hung in the air like smoke. "I didn't want the fame. I didn't want the interviews or the pressure. I was happy to let you be the great Alexander Keelan. I thought we were partners, You were the sword out there fighting the world, and I was the shield protecting the home. I thought that was our deal." She stood up and walked to the mantelpiece, trailing her hand along the wood. "But then," she continued, her voice dropping, "you started to believe your own press release. You started treating me not like a partner, but like an accessory, a fixture. You stopped asking me about my day. You stopped looking at me. And then came the women." Alexander looked down at his hands. They were shaking. Chloe wasn't the first," Eleanor said, turning to face him. "Do you think I'm stupid I knew about the intern in 2019? I knew about the flight attendant in 2021. I tolerated them, Alex. I looked the other way because I told myself men are weak, and as long as you came home to me, as long as you were discreet, I could live with it." Her expression hardened. "But Chloe, you took her to my world. You took her to Paris Fashion Week. You bought her a ticket to a show I funded in a hotel I own, wearing a dress from a designer I saved. You tried to humiliate me in the one place where I have my own name, my own respect." She reached into the pocket of her oversized trousers and pulled out a small black velvet box. She didn't hand it to him. She tossed it. It landed in his lap with a soft thud. Alexander opened it. Inside was his platinum wedding band. It looked dull in the dim light. "I'm keeping the company," Eleanor stated. "I'm rebranding it next week. The algorithms will run significantly faster without your ego clogging up the bandwidth. As for the house, it's already in a trust for the foundation. You have nowhere here." She reached into her pocket again. This time she pulled out a single check. She walked over and placed it gently on the small table next to him. "This is for you. A settlement." Alexander picked it up. His eyes scanned the numbers, expecting a courtesy million, perhaps 5. Something to let him disappear with dignity. The check was made out for $5,000. 5,000. Alexander looked up, his face pale. "Is this a joke? I have millions in equity. I have rights." "You have nothing," Eleanor said coldly. "The debt covenants I triggered swallowed your equity whole. And as for the amount," a small, cruel smile touched her lips. "That is exactly how much money you had in your bank account when we met 20 years ago at that coffee shop in Cambridge. Do you remember you were wearing a thrift store jacket, and you told me you were going to be a king? You always said you were a self-made man. You told every magazine that you did it all on your own." She walked to the library door and held it open. The afternoon light spilled into the hallway, harsh and unforgiving. "So here is your seed money, Alexander. Go be self-made. Prove to me that you didn't need me." Alexander stared at the check. The paper felt heavy in his hand. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had betrayed. She stood like a statue, unyielding and magnificent in her victory. He wanted to scream. He wanted to tear the check up and throw it in her face. He wanted to beg her to take him back, to let him be the husband he should have been. But looking at her face, that smooth, impenetrable mask, he knew it was impossible. He had broken the one thing that couldn't be fixed. He stood up. His knees popped. He placed the velvet ring box on the table next to the empty teacup. He folded the check and put it in the breast pocket of his ruined tuxedo. He walked past her. He smelled the scent of white tea and rain that clung to her. It was the smell of home, and he would never smell it again. "Goodbye, Eleanor," he whispered. "Goodbye, Mr. Keelan," she replied. He walked out the front door. He didn't look back. He heard the heavy oak door close behind him, followed by the solid thunk of the deadbolt sliding home. Alexander stood on the driveway. The sun had set. The air was cold. He looked at the check in his hand. $5,000. He looked at the dark sky. He started walking toward the train station. It was a 5-mile walk. He tightened his velvet jacket against the wind. He had a lot of work to do. Alexander Keelan never returned to the billionaires list. He moved to a small apartment in Queens and started a consultancy firm for small businesses. He works 12 hours a day, drives a Honda Civic, and for the first time in his life, he actually writes his own code. He is humble, he is quiet, and he is alone. Eleanor, on the other hand, took the company to the stratosphere. She rebranded Keelan Corp to Aegis Dynamics and became the first female CEO to triple a high-frequency trading firm's value in a single year. She never remarried. She spends her time between Greenwich and Paris, often seen in the front row of Fashion Week, always alone, always watching. As for Chloe Vane, she tried to pivot her brand to wellness and recovery, but the internet never forgets. She eventually left social media and is rumored to be working as a real estate agent in Florida under a different name. In the end, Alexander paid the ultimate price for his affair. He didn't just lose his wife. He lost the mastermind who made him who he was. He learned the hard way that in the game of life you should never betray the person who holds the keys to your kingdom. Wow, that is what I call a checkmate. It brings a whole new meaning to the phrase silent partner. Doesn't it? Eleanor played the long game and won everything. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes revenge and billionaire drama, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We drop new episodes every week. Until next time, watch who you trust and keep your secrets safe.